Hi, and welcome to the latest edition of Cockpit Conversations. It's a series where we meet inspirational people and put them on the air and in the air. And we've got some great guests too coming up, from pop stars to politicians, from authors to archaeologists. So make sure you hit the subscribe button so we can let you know when the latest videos go live. Of course, because of the pandemic, we've had to pause our filming. So I've been taking the opportunity of some of these rather cosy winter nights to look through some archive footage. Back in 2018, I met Grant Shapps MP, who's also a pilot. We were sitting in the back of this rather lovely Malibu Matrix, which I also have the privilege of being able to fly. We were talking about the importance of general aviation in the UK, which seems particularly relevant in the current economic climate. I started by asking him what inspired him to become a pilot.
Always kind of just, my dad used to make paper planes and stuff, and I always thought that was, kind of always had an interest in looking up to the skies pretty much as a result of that. And one day, and so I'd always had in my mind, I'd love to learn one day, driving along in the car, I think the roof may have been down, or on a bicycle, I can't remember which it was. And my friend said, oh, look at that plane, I'd love to learn to fly. And we were right by Elstree, so why don't we pop in? So we did, we both booked a lesson. And somehow he was busy that day, didn't do his lesson. I did, loved it, hooked, and just, forwent everything else in order to learn to fly, and stopped going on holidays and stuff for a bit just to learn to fly.
So did you have aspirations of becoming a commercial pilot?
No, never. No, I always wanted to go into politics. I was in business, printing company. I wanted to be in politics. So it was always as a hobby, maybe to get around the country or around Europe. But no, just as for the enjoyment and the, I just think it's a fantastic pursuit, and really anything that kind of takes you away from the normal everyday has the capacity to expand your view of the world.
It's a good way of clearing your head and
isn't it?
Making you think about nothing else but
exactly.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you're chairman of the all-party parliamentary group on
Yes,
general
right.
aviation.
Yes,
got it right now.
Yeah.
What does that involve? How did that come about?
Well, the truth is, aviation, general aviation in the UK, I mean, we have an enormously rich history in aviation. So I happen to represent a constituency in Welland Hatfield. We created the world's first commercial jet airliner in the Comet, and we have so many other world firsts. We're coming up for 100 years of the RAF. Without those guys, we wouldn't be sitting here freely speaking today.
Sure.
So aviation, massively rich history. I think there's a sense that we're in danger of losing all that. Our airfields were all built during the war. We are down to the last 123 licensed airfields in the UK. They only ever close. No one's opening them. The policy and laws make it difficult to open them. And I just thought that, actually I'm in the right place at the right time to help the country realise the ambition, the jobs, the STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, jobs and skills that come from aviation before it's too late. And that's why we created this all-party group, and it's become the biggest on any subject at all in Parliament. So we have 155 MPs and Lords who are members of this, which makes it the biggest in the UK Parliament.
That is quite impressive that it's the biggest group in
On
Parliament.
this subject, I know.
That's amazing. You mentioned and touched on planning there. Planning is quite an important issue in terms of GA. We've had issues at Wellesbourne, at Plymouth. Our first programme in the series is based around the southwest. Tell us a bit about the Plymouth story, because that was a great airfield.
Yeah, well, planning I think has been at the heart of the problem, and actually I'm kicking myself. I used to be a planning minister. I didn't really understand the problems perhaps at the time, but if you have a system that constantly undervalues the need to have airfields in the country and only ever says that they can be something else, or even mix use them, if that's the system, then of course you end up with insufficient pilots being trained. That's a sort of problem that we have right now. Insufficient air traffic controllers. So there's literally been an airfield that's failed to open commercial flights in the last fortnight because they don't have the air traffic controllers. All of these things flow from closing airfields, and the case of Plymouth is fascinating. And, Plymouth is in the southwest. It's a long way from anywhere. Transport's a real issue. What did they allow to happen? The airfields are closed down. The one thing which brought them transport connectivity for their economy locally to grow, they need that, and that's in the process, I hope, of being turned round. Planning's at the heart of all of that. We're working with Parliament and with ministers to get them to see the bigger picture, and they're starting to make changes, and that's very welcome.
Is that purely because airfields have been seen as brownfield sites and easier to develop? That's the main...
That's been a big part of it. And look, I've been housing minister, I know the pressures, and I'm not against us building houses, and sometimes they'll go perhaps as mixed use on airfields where they have a lot of space. But as a country, as a nation, we have to make a decision. Do we want the jobs? Do we want the skills? Do we want people to look to the skies and be inspired? Or are we just going to retire from all of that and not worry about, you know, being the country in the future that can fend for itself, as in the RAF, or indeed, you know, have an economy which is worthy of a great nation like ours, which means being able to export and having those ports, in this case airports, in place. So I think it's really important that we get policy in the right place. Luckily 155 MPs and Lords agree now, and we're starting to see the changes come.
That's brilliant. As you know, I'm involved in the battle to try and save Wellesbourne, and we've got an issue in terms of the Landlord and Tenants Act, whereby if a landlord wants to close an airfield, it seems they can do it just by saying they're going to demolish the airfield. Yeah, and that seems to be a...
Well, we had a lot of what you might call sort of constructive dismissal if it was in employment terms, but, you know, constructive ways of running down the businesses, the aviation businesses on there, and then they can go, oh, it's not profitable, or using tricks like the 1954 Landlords and Tenants Act. I think actually, again, ministers and Parliament needs to get a grasp of this, and actually the good news is, I hope at least, they're starting to. So we just had a very, very important, it sounds very dull, it's called the National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF. It's the master planning document for the whole country, or England, Wales. Everything flows from this document, and ministers just came out with a new version, and to our delight, we had spoken in advance and told them about our concerns. To our delight, they've defined what general aviation is in there for the first time. We've gone back through the consultation, proposed more changes, and some of those changes could make a really big difference in cases like Wellesbourne and elsewhere, where when you get to the public hearing, the planning process, the inspector, the process will have to put more emphasis on the value to society of having aviation, particularly in a country like the UK, which to get anywhere you need to either take a boat, the train, or you have to fly. I mean, there's no, we need those ports. So hopefully this planning document's really going to help, and we'll find out in July when the outcome of that comes out.
So what would you like to achieve in your time as chairman of the committee? Well,
I think we'd like to turn things around, and I hope that there's just some, green shoots of this now. I suppose it will always be the case that sometimes airfields will close. Reasons are many, but why shouldn't airfields open? The last airfield to open, I went to visit it last week actually, was Derby, and it's 26 years ago. Last new airfield to open. So we have to reverse this trend and have to see new airfields open for the sake of our kids, the future, the jobs in the future, and the prosperity of our nation. I think that's one thing, and we have to make it easier to be involved in this sector. If we were at an air show, we're in the UK. If we were in an air show, as I was a few weeks ago in Germany, they had entire hangars full of electric planes, and we should be pioneering that technology, cleaner aviation. We can't do that unless the laws are all in the right place. Things like becoming a pilot, you pay VAT on your training. I can't think of another piece of education that you pay VAT on. We shouldn't be paying it on this, and it's time to do something about it. So I think there are things that we can achieve as a cross-party parliamentary group working together to make sure we get a better deal for the future of aviation.
And we've touched on Wellesbourne and the national policy. How do you think you can work with local authorities to push them towards seeing what GA does for their local area?
It's a really interesting question. One of the things we're doing with MPs is really educating them. So we have MPs who come with us on visits. We took members of Parliament and Lords to Germany. They came to Rolls-Royce to come and see aviation being made there recently. They are coming to America with us to meet the head of the FAA and all the rest of it. So we've got the education of the MPs kind of now sort of in hand. actually, I think we need to extend that out to local authorities. Your typical planning department knows, frankly, nothing or next to nothing about aviation, doesn't understand why it's important, and actually all the pressure on them is to build other stuff. So we need to change that around, and I suspect that's a piece of work we've got a lot further to go on.
Yep. So finally, what do you think us as GA pilots can do to help you, help us?
Well, look, I think the number one thing is go and speak to your elected representatives, your politicians, be that your councillors or your MPs, about the importance that general aviation plays in this country, not just because it's the 100th year of the RAF, and without the RAF and aviation we wouldn't have this free conversation, not just because of that, but because, you know, in the future, you know, kids need to be inspired, need to look to the skies and not see a ceiling, a glass ceiling, or the sky as a ceiling, and get up there and be inspired about what can happen in their lives and to the future prosperity of our country. And I can't think of you think through all sorts of different things that people do. I almost can't think of a more sort of apposite explanation of, you know, what human endeavours can produce than the ability to reach for the skies. And Britain has led aviation in the past, and I want to see it lead aviation in the future, and we can, but we need to get all our ducks lined up. So I think that is what our future deserves, and I hope it's where we get to.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us in our nice little matrix. You're going to have a sit in the front and
Yeah,
play with the knobs.
It looks amazing. Thank you for having me. Cheers.